when I planted a tree to create my dream backyard. My neighbor Karen didn't hesitate to call the HOA, resulting in a $4,071 fine. Could one simple act of gardening ignite a fierce neighborhood showdown? I always dreamed of having a big, beautiful tree in my backyard. It wasn't just about shade or beauty. It was about creating a peaceful place where I could relax after a long day. One bright Saturday morning in April, I decided to make that dream come true. Armed with a shovel, some saplings, and lots of determination, I set out to plant a maple tree right in front of my house. The sun was shining and the birds were singing as I dug the hole. I had spent weeks researching the best tree for my yard, checking property maps, and even talking to local gardeners for advice. Everything seemed perfect. Little did I know, my neighbor Karen had other plans. Karen was known around the neighborhood as the perfect neighbor. She always kept her lawn immaculate, her flowers blooming, and her house spotless. But beneath that polished exterior, Karen was overbearing and quick to judge. If you had a problem, she was the first to voice it, often in the most dramatic way possible. As I planted the sapling, I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up to see Karen standing at the edge of my yard, her face set in a stern frown. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm planting a tree. It's going to help the environment and make our neighborhood even nicer." Karen crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "You can't just plant a tree anywhere. The HOA has strict guidelines, and this spot is clearly off limits. I'm going to call them right now." Before I could respond, Karen pulled out her phone and started dialing. My heart sank. I had followed all the rules, or so I thought. I glanced at the papers I had printed out, detailing the HOA's landscaping policies. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. As I waited, the sound of sirens grew louder. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived, their presence adding to my anxiety. Karen quickly explained the situation, her voice dripping with accusation. I tried to show them the documents I had, hoping they would understand that I was acting in good faith. The officers listened patiently but seemed unconvinced. "We'll have to inform the HOA about this," one of them said, before leaving as quickly as they had arrived. Left alone with Karen, I felt a mix of frustration and determination. "Look, I did my homework. I followed the guidelines as best as I could. Maybe there's a way to fix this without involving the HOA." Karen shook her head firmly. "There's no way around it. The HOA doesn't take kindly to rule breakers, especially ones like you. I'm telling you, this is going to cost you." As she walked away, I knew this wasn't over. The fine Karen mentioned seemed excessive, but I couldn't let her win without a fight. That evening, I sat down at my computer and posted my story on Reddit, hoping to find support and advice from others who might have faced similar issues. The response was overwhelming. People from all over shared their own battles with strict HOAs and entitled neighbors. Some offered legal advice, while others suggested peaceful ways to negotiate. Encouraged by the community's support, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone in this fight after all. But just as I began to relax, a notification popped up on my screen. Karen had seen my post and wasn't happy about it. She started leaving passive-aggressive notes on my mailbox and began spreading rumors about me around the neighborhood. It seemed like every time I took a step forward, she found a way to push me back. Determined not to let Karen ruin my dream, I decided to gather all the evidence. I needed to present a strong case to the HOA. I spent hours organizing my research, collecting property maps, and even reaching out to local journalists who were interested in stories about community conflicts. One evening, as I was reviewing my notes, I noticed something strange in the HOA guidelines. There was a small loophole that I hadn't seen before. Something about community. Approval for new plantings. Could this be my chance to overturn the fine and keep my tree? Excited by the possibility, I prepared my documents and scheduled a meeting with the HOA board. I knew Karen would be there, ready to defend her stance, but I felt more confident than ever. This was my chance to stand up for what I believed in and show that one person's dream could make a positive difference in our neighborhood. As the day of the meeting approached, tension in the air was palpable. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and I could feel Karen's eyes on me everywhere I went. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep, thinking about what might happen. Would the HOA see reason? Or would Karen's influence be too strong to overcome? I woke up early, determined to present my case clearly and calmly. With all my research in hand, I walked into the HOA office, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As I stood before the board, I took a deep breath and began to speak, hoping that this was the first step toward turning my simple dream into reality. The moment the police left, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I had never imagined planting a tree could lead to such trouble. As I sat on my porch, the weight of Karen's actions began to sink in. $49.71? That was an enormous amount for what I thought was a simple addition to my home. Determined not to let this unfair fine ruin my dream, I decided to take action. My first step was to understand exactly why I was being fined. I spent hours reading the HOA guidelines, page after page of rules that seemed to change every month. It felt like trying to decode a secret language. But I was determined. I highlighted sections, took notes, and even drew diagrams to make sense of it all. One evening, feeling overwhelmed, I turned to Reddit, hoping to find others who had faced similar issues. I posted my story in a community dedicated to HOA battles. Almost immediately, responses poured in. People shared their experiences, offered advice, and provided moral support. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone in this fight. Encouraged by the support, I decided to dive deeper. I pulled out my property map to see exactly where my new tree stood. According to the guidelines, there were specific zones where certain plants were allowed. To my surprise, the spot where I planted the maple was actually within the permitted area. My heart raced. Could this mean the fine was a mistake? Or worse, a personal vendetta from Karen? As I pieced together the information, I realized I needed professional help. I reached out to a local lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. The consultation was eye-opening. The lawyer explained that many HOAs have vague rules that can be interpreted in different ways. With their help, I started to build a case to challenge the fine. Meanwhile, Karen didn't give me a moment to breathe. She continued to complain about my tree to the HOA board, painting me as a rule breaker who couldn't respect the community standards. At every HOA meeting, she had the floor, making it seem like my actions were disrupting the neighborhood's harmony. Her constant pressure was exhausting, but I remained calm and collected, knowing that losing my temper would only play into her hands. One day, I received a letter from the HOA. It was a notice of the fine, detailing the reasons behind it and the steps to appeal. My lawyer advised me to gather as much evidence as possible. I spent weekends collecting photos, documenting my research, and even interviewing other neighbors who might support my case. Surprisingly, a few of them had also felt pressured by Karen's aggressive stance, though they hadn't spoken up before. As I prepared my appeal, I knew I needed to present a strong, undeniable case. I organized all my findings neatly, making sure every argument was backed by the guidelines or legal advice. The day of the appeal hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of fear and hope. Walking into the meeting, I saw Karen already there, her expression stern and unyielding. The hearing was intense. Karen took the opportunity to voice her complaints once again, but this time I was ready. I calmly presented my research, showing that my tree was within the allowed zone. I highlighted the inconsistencies in the HOA's enforcement and the emotional toll it had taken on me. The room was silent as I spoke, the tension palpable. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more stressful, one of my neighbors stood up to support me. They shared how Karen had been overly strict with other residents, making unreasonable demands that weren't part of the official guidelines. This revelation shifted the atmosphere in the room. The HOA board members began to look unsure, realizing that Karen's actions might be more about control than community standards. After what felt like hours, the board took a short recess to deliberate. My heart pounded as I waited outside the meeting room, hoping that my efforts would pay off. When they finally returned, the lead board member addressed the room. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, we've decided to rescind the fine. Additionally, we will be revising our guidelines to ensure clarity and fairness for all residents. Relief washed over me. The fine was lifted, and there was a promise of better governance in the future. But Karen wasn't finished yet. She glared at me, her eyes filled with frustration and anger. I knew this wasn't the end of our conflict, but for now, I had won a significant battle. As I left the meeting, a few neighbors approached me with words of encouragement. It was clear that my stand had inspired others to speak up against Karen's overbearing behavior. Together, we felt a renewed sense of community and determination to support one another. That night, I reflected on the whirlwind of events. What started as a simple act of planting a tree had turned into a fight for fairness and respect within my neighborhood. I realized that standing up against injustice wasn't easy, but it was necessary. My tree, now safe from fines, stood as a symbol of resilience and hope. Looking back, I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, but with the support of my neighbors and the lessons I had learned, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The battle with Karen had taught me the importance of persistence, research, and the power of community. And as I prepared for the next steps, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that I wasn't alone in this fight. The moment I walked into the neighborhood meeting, I could feel the eyes of my neighbors on me. Karen stood at the front, her arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. "We need to keep our community looking its best," she began, her voice echoing in the packed room. I took a deep breath, remembering all the research I had done. This was my chance to speak. I understand the HOA has guidelines, I started calmly, but planting a tree was my way of improving our neighborhood. I could see some neighbors nodding, but Karen wasn't having it. She interrupted me. Your tree is unauthorized and disrupts the uniform look we strive for. As the meeting continued, more neighbors voiced their concerns, all influenced by Karen's persistent complaints. I felt a knot in my stomach. How had a simple tree planting caused such a divide? After the meeting, I decided to take action. I went home and started digging through property maps and HOA documents, searching for any loophole that could help my case. Days turned into weeks, and Karen's influence only grew stronger. Every time I tried to discuss the issue with other neighbors, Karen was there, ready to shut me down. My attempts to appeal the fine were met with silence and indifference. Frustration built up inside me, but I remained determined. One evening, I returned home to find my fence vandalized. With hurtful graffiti, "Tree tyrant strikes again." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let Karen win. I spent nights reading legal advice articles and learning about property rights. Slowly, I began to piece together a strategy. I discovered that the HOA policies were outdated and had several ambiguities that worked in my favor. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a glimmer of hope. I reached out to a local lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. Together, we reviewed the documents and found that the HOA had never clearly defined the boundaries for tree planting. This was my chance to challenge the fine legally. I also started documenting every interaction with Karen and the HOA, building a solid case to present. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't idle. She started organizing neighborhood events, painting over my tree to make it look unsightly, and spreading rumors about my intentions. It seemed like she was trying to turn everyone against me completely. My stress levels soared as I juggled work, legal preparations, and dealing with constant hostility from my neighbors. One night, feeling overwhelmed, I turned to Reddit again, sharing my struggles and seeking advice. The response was incredible. Strangers from all over offered support, shared similar experiences, and even provided legal tips. Encouraged by the online community, I felt less alone and more empowered to fight back. With renewed energy, I scheduled a meeting with the HOA board. I presented my findings, showing the loopholes in their policies and the lack of clear guidelines regarding tree planting. The board members listened intently, some looking surprised by the depth of my research. Karen watched from the back, her expression unreadable. Just when I thought things were starting to turn around, Karen unveiled her latest move. She had petitioned for a special HOA audit, claiming mismanagement and favoritism. The board, now under pressure, agreed to review all recent decisions, including my case. This unexpected twist threatened to derail everything I had worked for. As the audit began, I could see Karen's plan unfolding. She had gathered more allies, convincing some board members that my actions were part of a larger pattern of rule-breaking. Meetings became tense, and the fear of losing my home weighed heavily on me. I knew I had to stay focused and continue gathering evidence to support my case. One afternoon, while reviewing the audit reports, I found something that could be a game changer. A previous board member had violated the same policies I was fighting against, but the issue had been swept under the rug. This revelation provided the leverage I needed to expose the HOA's inconsistencies and challenge Karen's accusations. With this new information, I prepared to present my case again, this time highlighting the HOA's own shortcomings. I knew it was a risky move, but it was necessary to ensure fairness. As the next meeting approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. This was my final chance to turn the situation around. The day of the meeting arrived, and the room was filled with tension. Karen stood up, ready to defend her actions once more, while I took my place, ready to reveal the truth. As I began to speak, I could see the board members' expressions change, realizing the depth of the issues I had uncovered. The room fell silent as I laid out the evidence, challenging not only the fine but the very foundation of the HOA's authority. Just as I was about to finish, the board chair raised a hand, interrupting me. "We need more time to review these new findings," she said. The delay was frustrating, but it gave me hope that my efforts were making an impact. As the meeting concluded, Karen gave me a cold stare, and I knew the battle was far from over. Walking out of the meeting, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and hope. The audit was still ongoing, and the outcome was uncertain. But I had taken a stand, using every tool at my disposal to fight for what I believed was right. As I looked up at my tree, still standing strong in my yard, I wondered if this was the turning point that would finally bring peace to my neighborhood. The tension was palpable, and with the audit hanging in the balance, I couldn't help but wonder what Karen's next move would be. Would she continue her relentless campaign, or would the truth I had uncovered finally shift the power in my favor? I couldn't believe it. After all the stress and sleepless nights, The big day had finally arrived, the next HOA meeting. My heart pounded as I walked into the community center, clutching my notes and the property maps I had spent weeks researching. This was my chance to stand up to Karen and the HOA once and for all. The room was filled with neighbors, many of whom I had spoken to online and in private. Some looked nervous, others curious. Karen sat at the front, her arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm and focused. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "I'm here to discuss the fine I received for planting a tree in my yard. I believe this fine is unfair and based on a misunderstanding of the HOA guidelines." As I spoke, I noticed a few neighbors nodding in agreement. I showed them the property maps, highlighting the exact spot where I planted the tree. According to these maps, my tree is well within my property line and does not infringe on any common areas. I've also researched local laws, and planting a tree like this should be allowed. Karen stood up, interrupting me. "This is exactly why we need strict rules. If everyone starts planting whatever they want, our neighborhood will lose its charm." "You're setting a bad example." I stayed calm. "Karen, I understand your concerns, but my tree is healthy and adds beauty to our community. I've talked to several neighbors who support my decision. Let's hear from them." One by one, neighbors began to speak up. Some shared similar experiences of feeling pressured by Karen and the HOA. Others expressed their support for my tree, saying it provided shade and improved the neighborhood's appearance. The room buzzed with conversation, and I could feel the tide turning in my favor. Just when I thought things were going well, Karen pulled out a stack of documents. "These are emails between our HOA board and other residents who have violated guidelines. It shows a pattern of unfair fines and favoritism." Gasps filled the room as I scanned the documents. It was true. There were several cases where fines were issued without proper cause. I had a plan. These documents show that the HOA has been inconsistent in enforcing rules. We need transparency and fair treatment for everyone. I had also brought media coverage to support my case. I reached out to local news outlets, and several have expressed interest in covering our situation. This isn't just about one tree. It's about how our community is being managed. The tension in the room was palpable. Some neighbors looked worried, while others felt empowered. Karen's confident demeanor began to waver as more people sided with me. I continued. "We have the power to make positive changes. Let's work together to create a community that respects everyone's rights and contributions." At that moment, the HOA president stood up. "After reviewing all the evidence and hearing the community's feedback, we've decided to rescind the fine. Additionally, we will revise our guidelines to ensure they are clear and fair for everyone." A wave of relief and joy swept through the room. Neighbors began to applaud, and even some who had been hesitant nodded in agreement. Karen looked frustrated, but knew she was outnumbered. "Fine," she muttered, and took her seat without another word. As the meeting continued, more positive changes were discussed. New committees were formed to handle landscaping requests, ensuring that everyone's voice was heard. The sense of unity was stronger than ever, and I felt proud of what we had accomplished together. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to express their gratitude. "Thank you for standing up," one said. "I was too scared to speak out, but seeing you so calm and determined gave me the courage." Another neighbor handed me a flyer. "We're planning a community garden project. Your tree is the first step toward making our neighborhood greener and more beautiful." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. I'm just glad we could work this out together. It's amazing what we can achieve when we support each other. Days turned into weeks, and the changes we made began to take effect. The HOA guidelines were updated, and the community garden project was underway. Karen, seeing that her tactics no longer worked, started to back down. She rarely spoke to me anymore, and the tension in the neighborhood eased. One sunny afternoon, I stood in my backyard, watching my maple tree sway gently in the breeze. It was a symbol of perseverance and the power of community. I thought about the journey we had been on, from the initial planting to the fierce confrontation with Karen and the HOA. As I watered the tree, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Standing up for what I believed in wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I had not only saved my backyard, but had also brought my neighbors closer together. We had turned a conflict into an opportunity for growth and positive change. Looking around, I saw families enjoying their yards, children playing in the community garden, and neighbors chatting happily. The once divided neighborhood had become a place of cooperation and mutual respect. I felt a profound connection to my community, knowing that together we had built something beautiful. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with vibrant colors, Karen approached me. Her demeanor was different, less confrontational and more resigned. "I guess I was wrong about the tree," she admitted quietly. "It does look nice." I nodded, offering a smile. "Thank you, Karen. I'm glad we could find a way to make things work for everyone. She gave a small smile in return. Maybe we can work together on the community garden. It could use your expertise. I agreed, feeling hopeful about the future. Together, we started planning the next steps for our neighborhood. Building on the foundation of understanding and cooperation we had established, the tree that had once caused such turmoil now stood as a beacon of what we could achieve together. As I looked up at the branches reaching towards the sky, I realized that our community was stronger and more vibrant than ever. The challenges we faced had brought us closer, teaching us the importance of standing up for what's right and supporting one another through difficult times. In the end, planting that tree had not only transformed my backyard but had also planted the seeds for a better, more united neighborhood. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey and the people who had stood by me, proving that even the smallest acts can lead to meaningful change.